Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. The jack-o'-lanterns grinned wide and toothy along Maplewood Lane, their orange faces glowing in the October dark. Children darted from yard to yard in a blur of plastic costumes and sugar-high shrieks, the air buzzing with laughter, crunching leaves, and the faint scent of smoke drifting from chimneys. It was the kind of night the neighborhood prided itself on, a picture-perfect Halloween. But then came the pounding. It was sharp, frantic, desperate, knuckles rapping so hard against the new resident's door that the wood nearly splintered. A man stood on the porch, costume askew, half of a rubber mask dangling from his face. His chest heaved, lungs on fire, as he glanced over his shoulder into the shadows of the street. His cape was torn, his candy bucket long abandoned somewhere behind him. "Please," he gasped, voice hoarse. "Open the door. They're coming. Please." For a moment, nothing. The carved pumpkins on the porch flickered, their candlelight bending in a strange rhythm as though caught in a breeze that didn't exist. The street around him seemed too quiet. The laughter of children had faded, swallowed by something heavier, something watching. Then the door creaked open. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the warm glow of the entryway. The porch light haloed their hair, their smile gracious and inviting. Behind them, faint music throbbed, an old jazz tune, soft and elegant, not the noisy thump of Halloween parties up the street. The stranger's voice was smooth, almost melodic. "You look frightened," they said gently. The man stumbled forward, relief trembling in his bones. Someone was chasing me. I swear I saw." He broke off, shaking, tears cutting pale streaks into the makeup smeared across his face. "Shh." The neighbor's hand reached out, long fingers brushing his shoulder with a tenderness that felt almost rehearsed. "Come inside. You'll be safe here." The door closed. And then the scream came. It was muffled, strangled, rising high before cutting short, choked into silence. A glass shattered. The jazz music didn't stop. Outside, the jack-o'-lanterns seemed to smile wider, their candles flaring bright for a heartbeat before dimming again. Trick-or-treaters passed the house without pause, unaware of the fresh smear of red that now glistened faintly against the inside of the frosted window. The night carried on as if nothing had happened. The morning after Halloween in Maplewood Lane always had a certain glow. Pumpkins slumped on porches, their carved faces sagging from the previous night's candle burn. Plastic skeletons dangled from trees, cobwebs sagged with dew, and the streets were littered with candy wrappers like colorful confetti. Bryn bent down to pluck a Kit Kat wrapper from her front lawn, squinting against the pale autumn sunlight. She was 28, all sharp edges softened by her sarcasm. Her hair streaked with copper she insisted was natural. She kicked the wrapper into the pile of leaves at the curb and smirked. "Another successful Halloween," she muttered, brushing her hands off. From across the street, Dex appeared, balancing a steaming mug of coffee like it was the Holy Grail. He was the kind of guy who could crack a joke at a funeral and somehow make it land. His t-shirt was wrinkled, his jeans worn, his grin lopsided. "Successful?" he called. "My car got egged by a 10-year-old Ninja Turtle. Pretty sure that's the opposite of successful." "Maybe he sensed weakness," Bryn shot back, her smirk widening. "Or maybe it was just the universe's way of telling you your car sucks," another voice chimed in. Ace ambled up behind Dex, his arms full of books. Always books. He was tall, nerdy, and perpetually sarcastic, with glasses that slid down his nose no matter how often he pushed them back up. He dropped the stack on Dex's car hood and adjusted his frames. "Don't scratch it," Dex warned. "Too late," Ace deadpanned. The three of them lingered at the curb, sipping coffee, bickering in the way only best friends could. They had known each other since middle school, back when they'd roamed the same suburban streets in plastic masks and pillowcases full of candy. Now, in their late 20s, they still orbited each other, their bond stubborn and unshakable. The street hummed with its usual post-holiday calm. Neighbors waved as they gathered decorations, kids biked lazily in the cul-de-sac, and somewhere a dog barked at a squirrel. Everything about Maplewood Lane screamed safety, familiarity, routine. Except for the house at the very end. The old Ashcroft place. It had been sold last month, though none of the friends had seen the new residents move in. One day it was empty. The next, curtains hung in the windows and a sleek black car gleamed in the driveway. The yard was immaculate now, hedges trimmed, grass cut with surgical precision. The porch lantern burned warm every night, but no one could quite remember spotting the newcomers during the day. Bryn glanced toward it, a crease forming between her brows. "So, anyone actually seen them yet?" Dex shrugged. "Nope, heard they're gorgeous though, like model-level gorgeous. Mrs. Klein said she nearly fainted when one smiled at her." "Mrs. Klein faints if you say the word vodka," Ace said dryly. "Not a reliable witness." Still, all three of them stared at the house, its windows glinting like watchful eyes in the morning sun. Something about it felt off. Something about them felt off. The days that followed drifted in a haze of cool mornings and crisp, leaf-tossed afternoons. The neighborhood had that gentle post-Halloween lull, pumpkins still rotting on porches, fake gravestones leaning half-buried in grass. But every conversation seemed to circle back to the new residents of the Ashcroft house. "They never come to the market during the day," Mrs. Kowalski whispered to Bryn at the corner cafe, lowering her voice as if the neighbors might be listening. "Always after dark, always buying wine. Strange, don't you think?" Bryn had only smiled politely, but the words lingered in her head as she walked home. That evening, the trio gathered in Dex's garage, Dex tinkering with his stubborn car, Ace perched on a stool reading a horror anthology, and Bryn sipping a soda from the vending machine they'd convinced Dex's uncle to leave behind. "I think Kowalski's onto something," Dex said suddenly, half hidden under the hood. "The new neighbors? Totally vampires." Bryn snorted. "Vampires? You've officially lost it." "Think about it," Dex insisted, poking his head out with grease smudged on his cheek. "They're never around during the day. They move in all mysterious-like. And didn't Mr. Callahan's cat go missing last week? Correlation is not causation, Ace muttered without looking up from his book, but there was a tightness in his voice that betrayed unease. Still, I've noticed their curtains are always drawn, even when it's sunny. That's weird. Bryn rolled her eyes but found herself glancing out the garage window toward the end of the street. The Ashcroft house stood in perfect order, its porch light glowing like a watchful eye. As dusk settled, she thought she saw movement, 3 tall figures stepping gracefully down the driveway, their silhouettes framed against the darkening sky. "See?" Dex whispered, following her gaze. "That's not normal." The figures didn't walk like neighbors. They glided. Each carried themselves with an elegance that made the mundane suburban street look suddenly cheap and artificial, like a stage set. Their heads turned as one, as though drawn by some invisible thread, and for a moment, Bryn felt sure they were staring directly into the garage. Her stomach tightened. One of them lifted a hand, slowly, deliberately, and waved. "Friendly," Ace muttered, but his eyes didn't leave the page. Friendly or not, Bryn couldn't shake the chill that crept down her spine. Something about that wave felt rehearsed, like a mask sliding into place. Later that night, she lay awake in bed and swore she heard footsteps in her yard. But when she checked the window, nothing stirred except the jack-o'-lantern on her porch, its candle sputtering as though it was struggling for air. The rumors bloomed fast like weeds. Every street corner, every backyard fence, someone was whispering about the Ashcroft house. The trio leaned into it, half as a joke, half as a nervous tick. "Maybe they keep blood bags in the fridge instead of milk," Dex quipped one night as they walked home from the diner. "Maybe they sleep in coffins," Ace added without looking up from his paperback. "Maybe you two should stop watching Fright Night reruns at 2 a.m, Bryn shot back, tugging her jacket tighter against the October wind. But then came the morning that cracked everything. The trio met up at the cafe, a sleepy Saturday ritual. The sun was bright, the air cool, leaves scuttling across the pavement like tiny paper ghosts. Bryn was stirring cream into her coffee when Dex suddenly froze, spoon dangling midair. "Look!" Out on the sidewalk, framed by golden sunlight, stood the new neighbors. They were gorgeous, just as the rumors had promised, tall, graceful, perfectly put together in tailored coats and polished shoes. But the shock wasn't in their beauty, it was in the fact that they were very much alive under the sun. One leaned against the railing, sipping from a steaming paper cup. Another laughed at something, teeth white, eyes glinting. The third adjusted their sunglasses and tilted their face fully toward the light, basking in it as though savoring the warmth. Dex blinked. "Wait, what?" "Not vampires," Ace said flatly, but his voice cracked the tiniest bit. The neighbors noticed the trio staring. Instead of shying away, they smiled warmly, waves, friendly nods, as if this whole thing were perfectly ordinary. One even stepped closer, catching the cafe door just before it swung shut, holding it politely for a passing couple. Bryn felt her cheeks flush, embarrassed at how suspicious they'd been. She sank back into her chair, suddenly self-conscious. See, she said, forcing a laugh. They're normal, totally normal. Dex frowned. Yeah, normal. He stirred his coffee a little too hard, nearly sloshing it over the rim. And for the first time in days, the tension lifted. By the time the trio left the cafe, they were almost giddy, teasing each other for their paranoia. The new neighbors were fine. The rumors were just Halloween nerves. And yet, as they walked away, none of them noticed the faint flicker of the neighbors' shadows on the sidewalk, delayed, stuttering like a film reel skipping frames. The days slipped closer to Halloween, and the decorations on Maplewood Lane grew bolder, brighter, louder. Skeletons dangled from balconies, fog machines hissed over manicured lawns, and strings of orange lights wrapped trees like glowing webs. On the surface, it was joy, festivity, the kind of neighborhood that could have been plucked straight from a glossy magazine. But beneath it, something shifted. It started small, details so fleeting the trio almost convinced themselves they hadn't seen them. One evening, Bryn was walking home alone when she caught sight of one of the new neighbors through a front window. They stood perfectly still, staring at the wall, not moving, not blinking. The moment their head turned and their eyes met hers through the glass, Bryn stumbled back. But when she blinked, the curtain slid closed, quick and deliberate. Another afternoon, Ace swore he saw one of them in the reflection of a shop window. Only the reflection wasn't in sync. The neighbor lifted their hand a second too late, smiled just after their lips had already curved. Ace rubbed his eyes, but the image burned in his mind. He told no one. And then Dex. At the neighborhood gathering, he'd made the mistake of standing too close. One of the neighbors, smiling, laughing at a joke, leaned near to whisper something. For a heartbeat, Dex thought he heard a sound that wasn't a laugh at all, but a sniff, like someone inhaling the scent of him, sharp and deliberate. Their teeth flashed when they grinned. By the time he told Bryn and Ace, his face was pale. They're not vampires, he muttered. But there's something. The trio tried to laugh it off, but the neighborhood itself seemed to press in closer with every day. Posters of missing cats turned into missing people. Mr. Callahan never came back. Mrs. Klein swore she saw someone moving in her yard at 3 a.m., and when she shouted, a figure disappeared into the dark with inhuman speed. And then the invitation came. Slipped into each of their mailboxes, crisp parchment with silver ink. Halloween bash, you're invited, costumes required, midnight revelry. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, ink pressed deep into the paper as though carved. Bryn's throat went dry when she held hers. Ace just stared at his. Damon gave a low whistle and forced a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Well, Damon said, breaking the silence. Looks like we're going to a party. Halloween night arrived, and Maplewood Lane blazed like a carnival. Jack-o'-lanterns lined every porch, candles flickering behind jagged grins. Children roamed in packs, candy buckets swinging, their laughter carrying into the night. The trio dressed lightly, Bryn in a devil-red dress, Ace as a half-hearted zombie, Damon in his ironic vampire cape. They told themselves it was just another neighborhood party. But the moment they reached the Ashcroft house, their bravado cracked. The place was transformed. Black drapes cloaked the porch, velvet and heavy. Lanterns swayed from iron hooks, burning with a glow too rich to be candles. A scent filled the air, spiced, metallic, cloying. The door stood wide open, music drifting out, but not the usual pop or rock. This was something older, violins and deep throbbing drums. "Hell of a decorating budget," Damon muttered, though his voice shook. Inside, the house was unrecognizable. Chandeliers glimmered overhead, casting fractured light across walls lined with antique portraits. Costumes filled the room, neighbors laughing, dancing, glasses of wine in hand. For a moment, it almost looked normal. Almost. Because the longer the trio lingered, the stranger it became. The decorations, too real. A bloody corpse sprawled across the dining table, its throat cut open, was greeted with applause as a centerpiece, but when Bryn leaned closer, the smell of iron filled her nose. She staggered back, bile rising. In the hallway, Ace brushed past what he thought was a mannequin in a police uniform, propped stiff against the wall. But he recognized the face. Officer Riley, the one who'd been reported missing last week. His skin was pale, waxy, his eyes glassy. Damon, jittery and pale, followed the sound of laughter into a side room. He found costumes, dozens of them, hanging in neat rows, stained, torn. Some he recognized instantly. The witch hat Mrs. Klein had worn at last year's block party, the cheerleader outfit from the teenage babysitter who'd vanished. The hosts moved among them all, smiling, graceful, beautiful as ever, but watching, always watching. And slowly the guests began to thin. One moment, a man in a pirate costume was laughing by the punch bowl. The next, gone, his empty glass rocking on the counter. The doors were locked. The windows had been shuttered. And in the dim light of the chandeliers, the neighbors began to change. Their skin stretched unnaturally, as if something inside was pressing to get out. Their jaws slackened, their smiles trembling too wide. Shadows clung to them like a second skin, rippling with every movement. Bryn grabbed Damon's arm. Ace's breath hitched. "This," Damon whispered, his ironic cape trembling at his shoulders, "isn't a party." No one laughed. The music swelled, a hungry roar of strings and drums. And the hosts bared their teeth. The chandeliers shuddered overhead, crystal trembling as though the house itself had taken a breath. Music pounded, the drums vibrating through the walls, through the bones of every guest. The trio stood frozen among the crowd, hearts beating like trapped birds. And then the hosts split. Their beauty fractured like porcelain cracking. Smiles peeled too wide, splitting their cheeks, exposing rows of slick teeth that shimmered like glass shards. Their skin rippled as if something pressed outward from beneath. Bones stretching, tendons twitching, a form struggling to burst free. The crowd gasped, nervous laughter echoed. But then the first guest disappeared, dragged screaming into the hallway, the sound smothered in an instant. Panic erupted. People surged toward the door, clawing at the locks, pounding at the windows. Nothing gave. The air turned hot, metallic, thick with the stench of blood. Bryn shoved Damon and Ace toward the kitchen. "Move!" But the house twisted with them. Hallways stretched impossibly long, shadows folding into shapes that weren't there before. Portraits on the walls seemed to watch, eyes glowing faintly red as if feeding on the chaos. One of the hosts lunged, its body collapsing and reforming as a mass of slick, spindly limbs, its teeth gnashing in a wet grin. Ace hurled a chair, splintering it against the creature's side. It shrieked, not in pain, but in delight. "They're playing with us," Ace shouted, his voice breaking. They stumbled into the dining room and froze. The table once set with food now groaned under the weight of bodies, real ones, pale and bloodless, dressed in costumes that still smelled faintly of autumn leaves and perfume. The centerpiece, a jack-o'-lantern, smiled with a flickering candle inside, its grin glowing through a crack that leaked something dark and sticky. Bryn gagged. Damon pulled her back just as one of the hosts loomed into the doorway, its body no longer human, its skin peeled open in ribbons, exposing muscle and glowing veins that pulsed like molten wire. Its jaw unhinged, stretching wider, until the sound of bone popping filled the room. They ran. The house became a maze, staircases leading to locked doors, windows opening only onto walls of shadow. Every turn revealed another glimpse of horror, neighbors dragged into darkness, party guests silenced with wet, tearing sounds. Finally, they burst through a back hallway and stumbled into the cellar. The air was damp, cloying, lit by flickering candles. And there, lined against the walls, were rows of costumes, dozens, hundreds. Every town they had visited, every Halloween harvest, preserved as trophies. Bryn's voice shook. They've been doing this for years. Before Ace could answer, the floor above groaned, the creatures hunting. Their laughter echoed, warping, overlapping, a chorus of joy and hunger. There was no escape, not from the house, not from them. But together, heart pounding, lungs burning, the trio clung to each other, knowing survival meant fighting through the nightmare, one door at a time. When the front door finally burst open, when they clawed their way out into the cold night air, they staggered into the street, gasping under the pale light of the moon, blood on their hands, screams still rattling in their ears. The Ashcroft house behind them pulsed with shadow, music still playing as if nothing had happened. And then they saw it. Every mailbox on Maplewood Lane now bore the same silver inlaid envelope. Halloween Bash, you're invited. The trio stared, horror rooting them in place. Because the party was far from over.